Hello, welcome. I am Brady. I am a co-host of the Junior Developer Happy Hour, and we're really appreciative of everyone showing up on a Saturday. As we were just talking about, I always give a little bit of a history of our meetup at the beginning here. We were just saying that we started this meetup in probably end of March when shelter in place was in effect everywhere, or in most places, I guess. And Sam and I both just happened to be in the same Dev Bootcamp alumni channel and realized that we were both trying to help junior devs get jobs. I specifically ramped up those efforts because I thought finding a job was really intimidating after graduating bootcamp in a really good economic time, and recognized that right now it's different, it's harder, it's more intimidating. I know Sam had a similar experience going through job hunting in a similar economic environment, so he can maybe talk more about that if he wants. But we've just been bringing in special guests every single week, trying to get different perspectives, different advice, let you ask all of the questions that you might have. And that's the purpose of this group. So I myself am a full stack engineer at Nordstrom Trunk Club. Really, the past year or so, I've been doing 90% front end work. So we use React front end. We have been using Rebase as a tool that's similar to, I don't know if you've heard of like Material UI, to be able to build components in like separately from the actual app and then reuse components. Our back end is Ruby. I went to a coding bootcamp in 2017. I had not really known what I wanted to do with my life before then, but I really enjoyed learning languages. So I majored in Spanish. I minored in Italian. I took a semester of Mandarin Chinese, and eventually over the years discovered that computer languages were really fun too, and you get to make cool things. There were nice benefits that came with the job. So that is how I ended up where I am. And then I'll just pass it on over to Sam.
Hey everybody. So yeah, I'm Sam. I'm currently a front-end engineer at Lyft. I build internal tools at the company for the mapping organization. Our stack is at Lyft in general, front end is mostly across all teams, React, TypeScript, Node.js. We have our internal design system, but we also use Material UI heavily for internal tools. We have more freedom to just use other things because our design system's not finished yet. So it's not as important for the internal tools to look and have that brand feeling, that Lyft brand. So and the Lyft design system is kind of built on Material UI, or like copies a lot of the stuff. So it's just branded with the Lyft colors and stuff like that. Some of the components are different from Material UI, but yeah, I use Material UI heavily inside of the apps that I work on. Yeah, I barely write any CSS, like raw CSS these days. But when I do, we use Emotion, which is a CSS and JS library on my team, at least. That's basically what I do now. What Brady was talking about is I had a computer science degree from a long time ago. I graduated during the dot-com bust, which is a really bad time to graduate as a developer. I gave up too quickly. Spent about 6 months maybe looking for a job. I don't think I even talked to any recruiters or anything though. I was a noob. I didn't have any mentors or anything. I didn't know what to do. And back then there weren't like YouTube. There wasn't a lot of resources. But yeah. Somebody's echoing.
Queen.
um, but yeah, fast forward, I went to Dev Bootcamp 2013, and then I did a bunch of stuff. Now I work at Lyft. Let me pass it off to Claire because I'm echoing.
Thank you for those intros. So I'm Claire Fleming Sidhu. A little bit about me. I'm obviously I'm leading up talent at Aerospike, which is an in-memory NoSQL database company that's based in Mountain View. About my background, I have about 10 years of recruiting experience. I started recruiting kind of atypically because I went to San Francisco State, and then right after I graduated, I moved to Europe, where I co-founded a recruiting agency with very little knowledge about the industry. But I ended up running that for 4 years pretty successfully, focused on tech recruiting in Germany. But then after 4 years of working on the agency side, which is a little bit different than working as an internal recruiter, I decided that I wanted some internal experience. So I ended up working for a couple different companies running their recruiting from Berlin. Then in 2016, or the end of 2015, I ended up moving back to the US, and I founded another recruiting agency, but this time it was just a one-woman show of myself. But that when I moved back, I decided to found this agency that was focused on working a lot with mission-driven tech. And so that's always been something I care quite a lot about. And I think I'm sure that maybe some of you too feel impassioned about different areas of civic tech or social, interest in social justice. So I ended up working on that for 3 years, 3.5 years. But then about a little over a year ago, some of my friends that actually work at Aerospike approached me about this opportunity. And so I'm no longer working for a number of different companies, and I'm focused on working internally for this one NoSQL database, which has been a super awesome experience, a lot of work, and a lot of hiring. And yeah, I work mostly in the Bay Area, but I'm actually based out of LA. So so actually remote work isn't too unusual for me. I've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, that's me.
Excellent. And Claire, you might be the one that is creating the echo.
No, that's my biggest fear. I was talking to my husband this morning that I needed to get my earpods in, or my AirPods, but like my operating system is too outdated, so I probably need someone who is here right now. Let me see if this works.
It's weird. It echoes sometimes, but not all the time.
I think that made the difference. It's perfect.
Well, I'm that person.
No, we're all learning how to do all this streaming stuff.
Okay, so I'm also just going to go ahead and post my stuff. So I'm happy to, maybe I'll post. I'm happy to connect with everybody and anybody. So there's my LinkedIn. Eventually this will be posted to my YouTube channel. I've gotten pretty behind. I promise those posts are coming from the previous weeks. And yeah, so Slido is great for where we can ask the questions, and then if there are follow-up questions or sometimes other conversation, or if we're talking about a resource, we'll add the links to the chat here in the Jitsi meeting. So that's usually how we break out what to type where. With that being said, I can go ahead and start reading. We've got people upvoting and everything. Awesome. The most upvoted question currently, what are some best questions to ask a recruiter on LinkedIn at a company you're interested in? like best ways to engage with recruiters and actually make an impression?
Sure. That's a great question. Well, so I think that I think just connecting with them and talking about your interest in their whatever company they're at is going to be very important. I think that, you know, coming in it with the idea of like, hey, I'm looking for a job isn't necessarily like just if it's just straight up like that isn't necessarily the best way. I think that showing that you have a genuine interest, that you've researched the company, that you can find some sort of bridge that connects your experience in an authentic way with their brand, with their company is definitely going to be really important. For instance, if someone is going to approach me, I really love when someone connects with me and says, "Hey, I went through your open source database, and I find it to be really interesting. I think I'm going to use it for this project that I have." And I think showing that you actually have interest in the technology that they're working on, or the project that they're doing is going to be super important. And so like research into, for instance, the engineering blogs that they've done, going through the company, if they have anything on GitHub or anything that's open source, any sort of connection like that to me shows that you're invested into the company. You're not just, spamming or anything like that, and that you've actually put together something thoughtful. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that sounds great. I know on the hiring side of things, just like if ever I'm interviewing people who act very interested in the company always leave a really good impression. So that makes a lot of sense for recruiters as well.
Yeah.
Are there any good resources for finding companies who are open to, or even better, interested in hiring people attempting a career transition?
So one thing that I'll say, obviously it's a little, I mean, whoever is in a career transition and is just getting started in tech, it's a little bit harder, and I definitely feel for you if that's what you're going through. Just know, like, hang in there, because I think that, you're gonna definitely get there. I think that in terms of resources, so before I worked at Aerospike, when I was working on helping mission-driven tech companies, one thing that was really important is, beyond the technologies that we're working on, if a company is, for instance, interested in education, I think if you find a company that somehow, it's again, for me, it's all about finding the bridge and finding sort of the ways that connect you and shaping your story of how you got to this career transition in such a way that you can just form that sort of connection that leads you to it. So for instance, let's say before you went to a boot camp, or you're doing a career transition, you were a teacher. I think going to specifically an ed tech company and searching for ed tech companies would be a really great sort of transition. And I think you might have a better shot at getting noticed because you have an idea of maybe how maybe what their product could do, or it's already an interest of yours. Or, if you worked in advertising before this, I think working or looking for ad tech companies specifically. In terms of resources, there's just so many different resources, but I think searching and doing searches in such a way would definitely be helpful. If you're particularly interested in a certain mission, for instance, just because I've always been very mission driven, you can go to a website like Idealist. I think it's either .com or .org, but that's a job site, for instance, that will align. That you can search for specific missions, like if you're really interested in the arts, if you're really interested in healthcare, or if you're interested in a specific sort of area. But yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, you can also follow like the hashtags on LinkedIn. Like I follow edtech, fintech, just stuff I'm interested in. Those are like spaces I'm interested in. I like my favorite spaces are like geospatial location data, because I worked in that for a long time, and I did the Peace Corps. So I also like the mission-driven companies. That's probably why I spoke to Claire a while ago. She always pops up in my LinkedIn feed, and then yeah, it seemed I was interested in the company she was pitching. So yeah, just add a bunch of hashtags that you're interested in, and then also follow the companies on.
Yeah.
I follow all the companies that I'm interested in on LinkedIn and Twitter, on both. I always go immediately and try and find them on both platforms, and I follow them just so I can be in the know about what those companies are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend that too. I think that, as a recruiter, especially when you're working internally, you have so many people who are applying to your positions. And so when someone I can tell follows and keeps up to date with the company I'm recruiting for, it definitely leaves a very positive impression. And yeah, it's always just good to know too, in case new jobs pop up. For instance, if you find out that if you followed a company and then you find out 6 months later that they're hiring a junior engineer, it's a great way to kind of transition into saying, oh, I've been following this company and I just found the perfect job that I would be super, super good for, and reaching out in that way. So.
All right. Maybe moving on. What is the one best resume advice you've given excuse me, I cannot talk. What's the best resume advice you've given junior engineers?
Oh, so there's so many. I have so much advice because I see so many resumes every day. Okay, the thing that I'll say for junior engineers specifically, there's a few things I really want to see. First of all, when I'm going through resumes, I'll have like a virtual stack of 100 resumes to go through, which is super daunting because then I also have to call people and do a bunch of other things. And so there's a lot of times where I'm like fried at the end of the day and I'm like, I just need to click through and find the candidate that I'm looking for. And so if your resume doesn't tell me the exact information that I need to know in, I'm not joking, like 5 seconds, I'll know. And so I think that being very, very clear with what sort of technologies you use is just so key, and just putting it so simply at the top of the resume so you can see exactly what you've done. You're just so often in a pile of 100 resumes, you really want to be super clear with what you do. I also think that, especially when you're a junior engineer, we see a lot of resumes that say the same technologies like React, Node, Rails, this sort of stack. And I think that if you really want to stand out, I think also having very clear and just super in front, just like the front of the page, information about the projects that you've worked on, that's very important too. Because I really need to see in the first 5 seconds that you have the tech skills, and then in the first 25 seconds that I can see you have a tangible project that you'll be able to talk to me about on a call. So I think that's super important. I don't judge too much on how like pretty the resume is. Obviously, it has to be super legible, but in terms of design, that's not a really big thing. I just think just as being as clear and upfront as possible.
Do you have any opinions? I'm curious. Do you have any opinions on adding a summary or not including a summary?
Yeah, I think a summary is great. I don't want to just. I'm not a robot just like ingesting information. I do like to see also like a 2 or 3 sentence summary, but again, it needs to be clear and it needs to be super focused on the specific thing that you're looking for, which is probably a job, like a full stack job, or the summary should be very short and give me a very clear indication of your interest and just 2 or 3 thoughts, again, bridging why I should talk to you. And don't definitely in the call that we would have, I'd want to know more about your story, but just try to make it as concise as possible in the resume. But yeah, definitely add some sort of personal touch as well. I think that's important too.
Mm-hmm. What are some good questions to ask during an informational interview?
So I think that, for an informational interview, obviously the person on the other end is sussing out whether there could be a right opportunity for you. But I also think that's a great time for you to understand more about the company. So I feel like asking things about how the engineering team works, if you were to join there, what sort of projects would you be working on? I think asking more in-depth questions about your day-to-day work would be important to me. If it's more informational, if it's more exploratory, I think asking questions about how, just generally what it's like working there. I think when people ask generic questions, like, and if you ask this, it's totally fine, so don't feel so, but if you ask just like, what's the culture? It's like a hard thing to say because, every company has a culture, of course, but, I think asking too much about salary or just culture or really generic things is less important. I really want to see that you're plugged in and want to know more about the inner workings of the company. That's totally my opinion, and some recruiters might be different. But I think that I always like to see curiosity, and I think curiosity is something that makes people stand out. And so when you really ask questions that are related to the job, to the specific team that you'd be working on, and kind of show that you've figured some stuff out yourself, that just shows that you're like a tuned in person.
Yeah, totally. And it goes back to you're showing that you're interested in the company again. If you're also curious, because I always think that, interviewing and this whole process is trying to find a good fit for both sides.
Yeah.
So if you are a career transitioner, it might be worth hearing about, were there other junior devs that have moved on and been promoted? What sort of relationship has been set up between, do you have a manager that you can talk to a lot? Is there a mentorship program? Stuff like that might be helpful just for you to know if that's actually the company that you would like to end up working at.
That's such a good point. And I think that informational interviews should be as much of an interview for you in the company as the company is interviewing you. There are tons of companies out there, and this is the time where you can figure out, that kind of working style isn't for me. For instance, a lot of startups, especially, they really expect you to be autonomous from day one. And if you are a person who needs mentorship, that's totally understandable, especially if you're starting out or going through a career transition. But knowing that up front, you don't want to get there first day and be like, all right, who's mentoring me? And then to be like, get started, you know what to do. So having that will definitely save you time too before you enter a hard working environment. So definitely a great suggestion.
Yeah, I always ask also team structure, because that's important to me. Just how many other front-end devs am I going to be working with? It might be boring if I'm the only front-end dev or whatever. Do I have a designer that I get to work with? Do I have a product manager? Do I got to wear all the hats? What their growth trajectory is. Are you trying to hire 10 front-end developers this year? How big do you think the company will grow this year? I ask all those kind of questions just to get a better idea of where the company's going, what they're doing. I ask a lot of questions about the product because I want to make sure what I'm working on is fun to me, not just something I don't care about. Stuff like that. Yeah. Is my video still working? I like disappeared.
Yeah, I noticed the same happened to me. I see you. If you find out a company has a lot of growth, for me, I feel like that would be scary. How do you interpret that if a company is expected to hire like 10 new people or like double in size, let's say, for a small startup?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. Or anyone who has an opinion, I guess.
It depends, but I kind of see that as a good sign, especially if I'm getting equity. I'm thinking, like, if the company is growing that fast, I'm like, oh, maybe this has a huge upside. It's worth me like investing in putting my time, spending my time with that company, for like financial wise. And I think it's just fun to have a lot of other front end developers to like just talk with. It always helps. Like if you're the only front end developer, you don't have anybody to like talk with about the new React stuff or whatever front end developers nerd out on.
That makes sense.
I would say though that I do think that is an important thing to ask up front because, it's so that, for instance, Sam, you like that kind of growth, but to me, for instance, if I were to see that, I would be like, I would have so many more questions about the company's stability. So many companies, I know this from the recruiting side and not reflecting any of the companies that I'm working with or have worked with recently, but when a company is saying that they're growing exponentially over the next 6 months, it makes me think that perhaps they're not really thinking through their growth. And for instance, the company I work with now is super thoughtful in every person they bring on. And I really love that about them because I know that every person, it's like a puzzle piece, and every person who's coming in really has a spot. And I think especially if you're coming from a place where you do need mentorship, if you're going to grow a bunch and if they're going to hire and then realize really fast that they're not meeting their what the board is telling them to, and they're going to have to they're going to have to do layoffs, then you might be the first person out as well because you're new. So I think just making sure that that they have a stable business plan is always a good question to ask too. I think knowing about that is super key.
Yeah, for sure. Like if you can get like their roadmap and stuff like that, and see if you believe that they're gonna be able to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are just like, their roadmap might be like super really hard to accomplish, and like they might be able to do it, but like you can kind of gauge for yourself if you think that's actually possible. Like how all the companies were like, we're gonna have self-driving cars next year in like 2018 and stuff like that, when that is probably way far off to have fully self-driving cars. So that's just one example of trying to gauge if you think like what they're trying to do is actually possible in their time frame. Because
sorry to interrupt. I also think that understanding a little bit more about the leadership and asking questions around the leadership is going to be important too, especially if you're working for a smaller company, because a lot of times, I just think that depending on the size, who's in charge is gonna make a big difference in how it is, and just knowing a little bit more about how the person that you're talking to perceives the leadership is going to be a pretty telling sign into the state of the company.
Great point. Yeah. I think we can go on to the next question. What tech skills do you think are most in demand currently?
So I have been so focused right now on just big data, database oriented stuff because I'm working for a database company. So a lot of what I've been working on hiring are things like, Spark, engineers who know things about Spark and Kafka, PyTorch, TensorFlow, things like that. And then also just it's kind of enterprisey, so also Java, Go. I work in that sort of space. And I definitely see a lot of that. I think that back end development is something that I've really been focused on for quite a bit. And so I see that there's a ton of demand for that. But I also think areas like data science, machine learning there's a lot of things to be done there. I'm obviously in this I don't want to say it's a niche space, but in this specific space. So I do see a lot of that. Before I worked for this specific company though, DevOps, cloud engineers, I really need a cloud engineer. So if you know of anyone, I think cloud engineering technologies, working with things like AWS, Google Cloud, Kubernetes and Docker are super, super in demand. And then also I do think full stack engineers, I think in my experience, Java, Ruby on Rails are the ones that in Go are ones that I've mostly worked on that I see in demand. And then on the front end side, which just to be completely honest with you, I haven't been working on for the last year and a half or so, React and just React and Vue and things like that. So I don't know if there's so many different areas and I've been in a sort of niche area. So I don't know how helpful that is for everyone.
I think that partially goes to show something that I had read a while ago was if you learn a language and you're only concerned about if this is the number one language that's interested this year, the language that you're learning doesn't have to be the number one language. I learned Ruby. I think I heard recently it was ranked like number 8 or 9 in most popular languages. I get contacted all the time. Are you interested in working at this company? They have Ruby. I mean, a couple months ago, we were hearing all about, is it Cobalt? That was preventing all of the checks from going out and reaching people, the stimulus money. Like, once a technology exists, you're probably going to be able to find jobs in that technology. Also, once you learn a technology, it's easier to switch and pivot to something that's a little bit more in demand.
The thing that I'll say too is that a lot of times, so for instance, the engineers that I'm hiring right now are doing Java and Go, but I think what hiring managers tell me is that they're not looking for Java specific engineers. Like if you know Java and you're like, this is the only language I'll ever learn, like I am the Java pro, like you're gonna get outdated eventually. So I think what recruiters or hiring managers are looking for is like versatility, in that you understand the fundamentals of, for instance, an object-oriented language or something like that, but then you're versatile enough to know that you're going to need to learn something else and that you can adapt. And I think adaptability is more important. But yeah, I mean, every top 20 languages that are out there, I'm sure you're going to find openings for it. There's like thousands and thousands of roles available for it.
Great. Can you tell us more about your experience with civic engagement through tech?
So, yeah, I definitely could. Well, mine has always been on the agency side. So essentially, what I did when I first, I guess this started post-election 2016, I felt very engaged in just wanting to make a difference. And so I worked a lot with different companies in the civic tech space. I was working from an agency capacity, so essentially not internally, but I would get hired to help place candidates in that area. My engagement has been from an agency side, but I do know of a lot of different, for instance, companies that are doing this. And also, if you are interested in civic tech, I could probably share resources after this. For instance, there's a lot of civic hack nights that happen. There's a ton of companies that are actually doing some pretty exciting things to help in civic tech. I don't know if has anyone heard of Code for America? That's like a really great organization. But yeah, that's my capacity has essentially been placing candidates, so placing engineers into civic-oriented tech companies. I don't know if that answered the question.
I think, yeah, if we have follow-up questions, we can always come back to it. When looking for potential employees, how impactful is a culture fit?
It is important, but it also, it depends on what you mean, because, so when I first was in tech, I thought that a culture fit meant that I needed to hang out with all of my coworkers and, you know, drink beers after work and play ping pong and like be part of this tech bro culture that I'm totally not about. And I also like don't drink. So it's, you know, when I thought about that, if you think of culture in that way, I don't think it's super important. And I think if there's a company that finds that you need to be best friends with everyone in the company important, it's, at least to me, that's a red flag. I don't think that culture in that sense should be important. However, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. I do think working culture is important. And I think understanding the mission and the values of and aligning with that mission and those values with a company is important. For instance, like I was saying before, if you really need mentorship, and the company is like a 20-person company where every person is totally underwater with work, it's probably not going to be a good culture fit because they're going to expect you to work a lot by yourself. And so I think that in terms of that way of thinking about culture, it is really important because you need to know the working style. But yeah, in terms of like fitting in with the group and being part of the cool crowd, I personally don't think that's important. And if it is, then I probably wouldn't want to work for that company. I don't know if Brady and Sam, you feel the same or differently, but that's how I feel, having worked with so many different companies in tech.
Yeah, culture fit seems to be really important to most companies. Yeah, especially at Lyft too. It's a big thing. Even at my last company, Pivotal. I think every company I've worked for.
What do you, Sam? What do you think of? What do you think the culture of Lyft's? What do you think the company culture is at Lyft? Like, what do you think that's like?
So they like people who like uplift other people, like that will help out, you know, and not just be that rock star developer who just works by themselves.
Yeah.
What else? Just being able to also be independent, like being able to help others, but also being able to like unblock yourself or know who you ask to like help unblock yourself, so you don't just sit there all week stuck on something. Just stuff like that. Yeah.
I would say that having a good attitude is extremely important in terms of culture. I think that flexibility and being able to, especially in startups or companies that are growing quite a bit, I do think that, you know, that kind of having a good attitude and a good mindset to grow is definitely important, I think, for the culture.
Yeah. Oh, somebody's phone. Yeah. What about you, Brady?
Yeah. So I was hired. My job I was hired onto was Trunk Club. the company back in 2017, and just recently Nordstrom fully absorbed us. They had already been acquired by Nordstrom, but they were acting as a separate entity. So I still feel like our culture has remained intact. And I know at Trunk Club, there was a lot of emphasis on the being willing to learn from people, being willing to teach other people, kind of no matter what level people are working together. A junior might be able to teach a senior stuff. So being open to all of that. And I noticed, I assume it is pretty common in tech in general, but the more I'm talking to people, I realize it's not across the board. When we find issues, we're always like, the expectation is there's going to be a conversation on like a retrospective, trying to see what caused a specific issue, getting to the root, like the upstream cause of that issue. I feel like that kind of proactive, it's not really in my job description, but I'm going to try to make things better for the future for all of us. I feel like that is a big part of our culture as well. And I mean, we do tend to have a group that is like under 100 people. And so, especially when we were all working together, we would tend to go up to our rooftop and have some drinks up there. Certainly not every single person was best friends with every other person, but it was kind of like a lighthearted, like, yeah, we'll work really hard, work hard, play hard. It's so stupid to say, but kind of that was essentially it when we were all working in person. It is hard to put words to a company's culture. I just muted myself again, but I am on. Next question. How is Aerospike to giving a bootcamp grad a chance? Has the company hired bootcamp grads in the past at all?
So in my experience, I've been here for about a year, just over a year, and I would love if we had the opportunity to hire more bootcamp grads. Just unfortunately, in the current state of what we're hiring for, we've mostly been hiring mid-level and senior engineers. So unfortunately for Aerospike, and at this time, we haven't really had the opportunity just because of what our current openings are and sort of our need to scale. I would love to in the future, and in different companies, I've hired a lot of bootcamp grads who have really grown and been successful. But yeah, potentially when we have, when our positions are less senior to mid-level, that could be an option. We did hire graduates a little while ago, but yeah, currently I don't know how other companies are experiencing this, but of course, COVID has changed some of the openings, and I know that some companies have had to reel back on their hiring a bit. But yeah, so I think we're definitely open to it, but right now I think the positions are very, very for very experienced people, if that makes sense. Long-winded.
Yep. I just posted a link. Lyft is hiring bootcamp grads right now. But if you didn't apply yet and plan to apply, I would do it as soon as possible, because they're probably going to close it pretty soon, I think. I think they got a lot of applications this past week. Also, Microsoft. So these companies are bigger, so like they're able to have these like apprenticeship programs. I'll post the Microsoft one as well. those both just opened, I think, in the past week. So it's always good. That's why it's good to follow all these companies on LinkedIn and Twitter. So when the timing is right, you can just jump on it, because some companies might just have the opportunity open for a day, and you got to pay attention and just jump in there before everybody else applies and they close the position. But yeah, I recommend apprenticeship programs especially for bootcamp grads. It's a way to get some experience.
Yeah, I recommend that as well. And it's like, it frequently ends up matching the skills right where you are. I had such big fears that I didn't know the tech as well as I needed to know it. My interview process, essentially, I was an apprenticeship level when I got hired on, and the company had the expectations of someone with my set of skills. So yeah, apprenticeships are great. What are the best networks and groups to join to meet more teams in mission-driven tech?
Great question. There's so many. There's just so many out there. So I'm trying to think off the top of my head. There's an organization called Fast Forward. They actually have a job board too. I'll like post this on here. I think that Fast Forward is a really great one. In every local area, I see civic hack nights. I think what I would recommend doing, if you are interested in, for instance, civic tech, you can go onto Meetup and look up civic hack nights in your area. And that's a really great place where people are, trying to work towards creating. Oftentimes, this is a place where you can build projects that, can help in some sort of civically minded way. So definitely wherever you're located, just try to look up and see. Also, I would look up I don't know. So in LA, we have Built in LA, but I think a lot of regions have this as well. And I found that there's a lot of, every region that I've been to, I'm sure they're in New York and San Francisco and Seattle and Austin or wherever as well. But just try to go into sites like Built in LA, Built in SF, Built in New York, and see what kind of civic organizations are there. I think it's really great because there's so many local ones. I know Techeria is a really great organization if you're part of the Latinx community. For instance, they help to create projects related to serving the Latinx community. Other organizations, I think you should check out 80,000 Hours, I think it's called, which is a great organization that helps people find work that it's essentially it helps people. What is it called? I'm so sorry, I'm blanking, and I have a really great thing to say, but I can't think of it, so I'll carry on. But yeah, civic, and then Idealist. Impact Hub is a great place. You could definitely find people. Impact Hub is a local thing too. I feel like they have one in San Francisco, LA, New York, all the places. There's so many. I think that will probably give some indication that there's a lot. But I also think that if there's a specific thing that you're interested in, I know this is like really obvious, and I don't want to be like, just Google it, but I don't want to give you all things that are just in LA or San Francisco. But I would say, from my research, and because I was hiring for mission-driven companies for so long, Googling something that you're passionate about, and then your city will oftentimes find, sometimes an accelerator, sometimes an organization that you can contribute to. Like, let's say that you really care about climate change. You could probably Google like climate change tech Austin, and you might find something. There's just too many, but I hope that helps. Also, yeah, check out Code for America. That's like really great for civic stuff. They actually have a great job board too. And if you have any sort of experience in government work, I know that they do hire a lot of the organizations that are on Code for America do hire bootcamp grads. So something to just consider as well.
The thing that I love about all those suggestions are if you find a group of people who are working together to say, like, make change in climate change. If there is a group of engineers working on that in a public space, they are probably going to be so excited for any juniors to come help and likely very, very willing to mentor you. So you're going to get a lot of great experience working on this project and doing a lot of good in the world.
It's so true. And yeah, that's the thing. And I don't know if we've touched on this, but when I am hiring junior engineers, one of the most important things that I look for is project work. And it's so hard when you're just starting and you just did a 3-month accelerator and you're just like completely fried from just working so much and learning so much in 3 months that, it's so hard after that. And, how do you have even time to talk about projects and do projects? And I think that partnering with one of these organizations will not just give you a network of people who are, who maybe will champion you to get a job in the company they're at, but also just be a mentor. And then also it's a great way to get project work, which is the one thing that I'm going to ask most about in an interview setting is, what projects have you worked on? Can you talk a little bit more about this project? And then to be able to say that you developed something and then also it's like mission driven or civically minded, I think that's just a huge plus. So yeah, networking, it's like great for networking. It's great to feel good that you're doing something. And it's it's altruistic. I think it's all good.
Yep. I posted a bunch of the links in the Jitsi chat. I think I found the right fast forward page, ffwd.org. Also, I added in Exegy. It's a consultancy. I actually got an offer from them before. I never ended up taking it. I had a couple offers during that interview round and I went with a different one. I really like the team though. I still follow them on all the social media. I like the projects they're working on. So I added that link as well if people are interested. It's an agency in San Francisco. I'm not sure if they're hiring remote or not. I haven't looked at their job openings in a long time.
I think they do actually. I think from my memory they do.
But yeah, I went on site, interviewed. I really liked all the people that were working there. And Code for America, speaking of them, we talk about them every week, I think, almost on this meetup. Always recommend their hack nights. They do it virtual now, so anybody can go. There's another hack night somebody put in the chat just now. And Code for America's San Francisco hack night is on Wednesday nights. And somebody in this group, I don't know if they're here right now, they just made their first pull request to one of the projects for the COVID dashboard. Do you recall?
Yeah,
Brady,
Jensen. I see Jensen.
Jensen. Yeah, that's who it was. Yeah.
I'm here.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey,
You want to talk about that real quick while we're on the Code for America topic?
Oh yeah, sure. So appreciate that it got mentioned. So pretty much after graduating from bootcamp like a few weeks ago, I was researching civic engagement hacking groups, and I found Code for SF, which is a brigade for Code for America. And one of their projects is a Bay Area COVID dashboard, which compiles all the data in just one single site so that you don't have to like go through like different sites to find out the numbers between. So I made my first contribution this week on the front end side. It was pretty much like a redesign of the pages in the website. And other than that, from my experience, I thought it was very beneficial because it was my first time working with a team, especially with like professionals also, but they're volunteers. Yeah, there's like designers. There's like it's like a well-established team. They have like a UX designer, a couple of developers, and I had two developers kind of mentor me on trying to work with the framework that they have because I haven't had any experience with that framework before. So it was a good experience, and I urge people to yeah, join in and volunteer if you have the time. It really helps making a real world project and gives you a little bit more understanding about the code review process also for big projects like that. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think we can move on. I love all the chatter about all the different meetups people have and hack nights people have attended. So the next question, would you recommend we have two resumes, one a more traditional format and one as an infographic?
Okay, so this might be a hot take, so bear with me. Okay, and so I'm also one opinion too. So if I say this, like, don't let this crush your dreams of one certain resume. But when I see infographic, it doesn't necessarily, to me, it kind of shows me that you don't have enough to talk about on your project side. Like, I think I just like super straight. So yeah, hot take again. But I really like just like straightforward resume. I don't like any bells and whistles. I have, again, like 5 seconds, and like an infographic is really pretty. And so maybe if you're looking for a designer or a front end, if you're looking for that kind of position, that might be important. But to me, I just want to see like content. I want to just be able to soak up as fast as I can and as straightforward as I can, just all of the information for your engineering experience. So to me, I like just like generic, brief summary, tools, skills, things that you've worked on, and then like projects, just so I have it all. But it might just be because I'm like flashing through so many resumes that it's so much. I just want to get to it. I don't know, Brady and Sam, I don't know if you've had to hire people before. I don't know if this is a hot take. That's how I feel.
I've actually never reviewed any resumes that are infographic. It's just standard, like normal looking resumes when I had to like help my boss, like, because my boss, he's not as in tune to like all the front end stuff. So like he'll like forward it to me. He's like, what do you think about this person? And I normally, first things I do is I don't even look at all the stuff. I just go to their GitHub and their LinkedIn, and I look at their code and I look at their LinkedIn, and then those are the first things I usually do before I even look at all the other stuff. And if they have open source projects, I go look at it. I look at how many people are like using it and stuff like that. Just those things like are interesting to me. Yeah.
To me too, that's so much more important to me as well, is that, you know, when I click on your GitHub, I can see that you've been active. I think that's such a good sign. And you know, although I'm like, man, infographics, I do think having a good website is nice. So maybe that's like against it. I just think if you could be as clear and as simple as possible and let your work speak for you, that is a benefit to me. And so yeah, like what Sam was saying with GitHub, being active on open source projects and things like that, I'd more likely just like click on your LinkedIn and click on your GitHub and see what's happening there, rather than like fret about how pretty it is. Even though, good job if you have a pretty resume, because I don't.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think there are benefits in playing around with resumes with like wording and placement of things. But I echo that if you're looking for a design role, that could be maybe there's a different answer. But if you're looking for a developer role, I mean, I've pretty much been front end through the past year, and I still don't make any design decisions. Decisions I'm making are more of like, maybe I'll question like, is this really supposed to say this word, or should it be spelled out in a different way? Or typically the designer has already made all of those decisions, and then we'll work together to make sure that like the CSS grid is laying out like he had expected it, because maybe he was just putting stuff on a page. Yeah.
I think one other thing I'll say, and this is just something I've learned from years of recruiting, is that so like being as neutral as possible on your resume is going to be very important, because you know, even if it's a great visual or design to you, it might not be nice to everyone. And so you might be like, dang, I am impressing them with how this pink looks. And if they hate pink, they might be like, who cares about their resume? Like they made it in this color. Like, so what I'm saying is you could potentially, they could potentially have prejudgments before actually meeting you because of a design choice that you have. Just in the case, I think like being as neutral as possible and letting your work speak for you is important to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good rule to follow for resumes, personally. All right. Ooh, how do you include measurables or deliverables for a resume?
What do you mean?
So I think this would be, I frequently am trying to tell people, include numbers on your resume.
Yeah.
Quantify things.
Yeah. So, okay, so in terms of quantifying things on resumes, I know that people, like one thing that I've always just learned from resumes is that you should be able to say things like drove growth by 2,000% over 15 months. And I don't personally really feel like it has to be that way when you're an engineer. Like if you're getting a sales job and you're like, you need to showcase that you've done certain things like that, I think that that's important. I don't think that you really need to see so many measurables with, personally, when you're doing engineering work. And also one thing that I've seen people do that I personally don't really like is that they put all of their skills like Java, Objective-C, Golang, and then they'll say like expert or like 6 months, 10 months, 12 months. That can only work that will only be a disadvantage to you, because you're either showing that you're okay at something and good at something. It's never gonna, if you just have it on your resume in like plain, just I know Objective-C, Java, Golang, then you're not having to, you don't want to quantify it, especially when you're a junior developer, because you're basically just telling people that you don't have much experience with something. So I would say try not to measure things in terms of years, in terms of experience. Talk about that obviously on your initial call, but I wouldn't put like, noob, like you don't want to look like a noob basically. So I would try to not measure it, especially as a junior engineer. Once you're like 15 years in, then you can say, I have 15 years of experience, or 10 years or 5 years. But I think especially to start, don't do that. Brady, do you feel the same? What do you think?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the years. That's a good point. I was thinking of, if you're looking for things to measure, you can always say, well, and this is a good question for you, I guess. I'm always saying, talk about how many weeks your boot camp was. especially if it was on the longer side. You could talk about like how many people were in the cohort that you were working with. Maybe that would give the impression that you, or convey that you were working in groups and had to communicate. Also, like I've seen people write tests for projects they've made, and then they can talk about either how many tests there were or the percentage of the code coverage. If you can incorporate something like Circle CI, that'll measure percentage of code coverage. Circle CI is a really in-demand skill in general, or like, what is it, CIC? Say it again?
CI, continuous integration, continuous delivery?
Yeah, CI/CD. Some other creative thing I saw or have heard of recently, if you can write something and figure out how to measure how long that thing took, like how long it took to run an algorithm or something, and then optimize it. It doesn't have to be in production, but all of a sudden you've got a really great metric. You could add like more faker logs to whatever fake project you've got that maybe the real public isn't interacting with. But once you have those like fake users, you can optimize something that they would do, some way that they would interact in your application.
That's definitely a good idea. I think that if you see that, specifically, Brady, what you just talked about with the algorithm, when I see someone, especially a lot of the things that I'm hiring for a NoSQL database is related to performance. And so if you're able to showcase, that you've optimized speed or performance, that's always like a really big thing. And I know it's tough when you're first getting started. So I think that if you can showcase that something was really slow or not performant at first, and you really innovated it and you made it a lot faster or better, that's a really great, I think, thing. Just showing that growth in any way is just so important. You just want to see that someone is like taking something from not so good and then making it good. But I think that's like a really good point of what might be a good idea. That's great.
Yeah, I just add a little bit. I usually don't recommend people put numbers on unless you have impressive numbers to show. I think it only hurts you usually, especially as when you're just starting out. That's just my opinion though. But if you do have impressive numbers, I definitely recommend putting that on your resume. Like I reviewed a resume recently for contractor we were hiring, and they put like 1 million downloads of my open source project that I put on, and I went and looked on NPM just to verify that was true. And then I like went and looked at all the code. I'm like, oh, why did 1 million people download this? So, and it was just a like little utility tool for React Native, and that just immediately caught my eye when I like looked at their. That was like where my eye was drawn to first when I looked at their resume. So yeah, that's my opinion.
It could definitely be. It's also one of those things like that could hurt you. So sometimes it's better, to like leave it out. Like sometimes people put on their GPA, which I totally don't ask for, and it's like, why would you tell me you have a 2.5? So unless you have like a 4, unless you have these great numbers, like Sam was saying, try to just leave it out.
I don't put my GPA. I don't even put the years I went to Dev Bootcamp or college. I take off the years. I take off all the numbers. Then they're gonna be like, they're gonna be like, this guy's old. People have an unconscious bias. I'm 40, by the way, so people don't know. I didn't start my career till I was 34, as a developer, because I failed the first time I tried to break into the industry. So I took 11 years to get my first job as a developer after I learned how to code.
That's that's a number you could put on. No.
That's a number I don't want on there. That's why I don't put the years.
Longest job search ever.
Like, it's not important when I learned. I learned.
Cool. The last question we've got right now is, a lot of jobs are not posted on LinkedIn. What's the best approach for researching or for reaching out to recruiters, companies, and finding out about potential jobs?
Well, I think that what I think Sam was saying before, I think following companies and just seeing if there's any changes in their companies, always a great thing to do. In terms of reaching out to recruiters, it's always good to, for instance, I connect with a lot of people. For instance, if anyone wants to connect with me, please feel free to, and I'd be happy to, if I can ever help or help your network, please, feel free to connect with me. In terms of like, if you're looking for a job at a place, I think it is great to, share that you're interested in the company. I think what's a better solution though, because for recruiters like me, if you would see my calendar, I talk to like sometimes 10 people a day, and there's so many people that I'm interviewing with on a daily basis, in addition to the hundreds of applications that I go through also. So there's, I am generally pretty swamped, and I think a lot of recruiters are very swamped with roles that we are actively hiring for. So it can be tough to kind of keep you in our thoughts when we're thinking about positions. So I think being an open person and connecting authentically, and then also just checking in, is a great idea. But I also think that beyond the recruiter like me, who is, I'm essentially the gatekeeper to getting you the job. I'm not like, I know it seems like I am the person that will help you, but a lot of times I'm actually the gatekeeper so that my hiring managers don't have to, talk to like the hundreds of candidates that I do. So what I would actually recommend is, instead of reaching out to someone like me, or a recruiter, please reach out to me. Please feel free to do that. But I would recommend actually reaching out and doing some research into who might your hiring manager be. So I would say reaching out to engineers in the team that you want to work on, and reaching out to, people that are actually, that you would work with, would be a better way to keep up to date. Because one, I think that less people do that. I think a lot of people reach out to me because they think I'm the immediate person. But so it's more memorable, but then also you have an advantage, because if you reach out authentically, I think that naturally people want to help other people. I think that if you reach out authentically and say, hey, I really like this company. I love what you're doing. I looked at your GitHub. I saw this thing. That leaves a really good impression. And I think that you would just have a better chance of being remembered and also getting into a company if you reach out to someone on the engineering team. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree too. If you can get an engineer or hiring manager to champion you, you're gonna get an interview most likely. I think they'll reach out to whoever the recruiter is and be like talk to this person. I think Aline Lerner gave the same advice when she was on this show. She was the only other guest we had who was a recruiter previously. She's not a recruiter anymore. She started her own company, Interviewing IO. But yeah, I think she said the same thing.
Yeah, and I think though, it's really important though that this might be obvious, but I think that approaching it in a way that's, I think just like curiosity and interest is just this super important part to, I guess, establishing any sort of relationship in your network. But I think that reaching out to these people in an authentic way, not just like, hey, I want a job, let me know, but like showing that you did research, that you genuinely want to learn from them. I think that'll just increase your odds too.
Yep. Looks like we made it through all the questions.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions? Otherwise, we can wrap things up with Claire and do introductions. We usually do it. We stop recording at the end usually and do introductions for anybody that wants to stick around and just get to know each other. But while Claire's here, if anybody has any other questions, going once, going twice.
Let's stop recording. We can all talk for a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for joining us today, Claire.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've had some wonderful advice.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, everyone who's here, if you do want to connect with me, please feel free to do so. And obviously I am busy with the going through resumes, not to scare you, but if there is like a follow-up question you have, also you can definitely email me. I'll put my email here if you are curious.
So after this meetup ends, I will put all of the links into our Slack space, so people will be able to look back at that email.
Great, yeah, and yeah, I hope that was helpful. If you guys do have any follow-up questions, like truly, I'd be happy to answer.
And I know you had mentioned some resources for civic tech.
Mm-hmm.
Did we end up covering those resources?
For the most part, yeah. I just think that I'm gonna try to look. I've obviously been working at Aerospike for a while, so I've been a little bit removed from it. But I have like a big sheet of a big Excel sheet of all of my things that I don't have on hand right now. But
you can message it to me and I can post it in the Slack later.
Oh, that's great. Thanks,
okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording, and then we can go from there.